In 1969, a killer wrote to the press and said his name was hidden in a code. 50 years later, we still don't know who he was. This is Crime Stand Still Deep Cuts. I'm your host, Carrie Drobin. Welcome. Did you know that the 1960s was a period in California history when serial killers didn't just exist, they overlapped? I mean, we're talking Zodiac in the north, Charles Manson's followers in the Hollywood Hills, the co-ed killer Edmund Kemper in Santa Cruz, and later Herbert Mullen, killing to prevent earthquakes. They were all active within the same era and sometimes even operating in the same cities. And no one had any idea just how many of them were walking among us. Terrifying, isn't it? But what made them surface at exactly that decade? The Cultural Revolution and the Murder Revolution. So between 1969 and 1974, the Zodiac killer waged a psychological war on the Bay Area. He seemed to crave attention more than blood, obsessed with headlines, desperate for notoriety, inventing a game that blurred the lines between fact and fiction. His first kill, teenagers David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen necking on Lover's Lane, a popular gravel turnout off Lake Herman Road, their first and last official date. Hours later, passing motorists discovered their bodies sprawled beside the car. Betty Lou had been shot 5 times in the back, her blood staining the roadside dirt. David lay beside the passenger door, barely breathing, a single bullet lodged in his head. He died before help could arrive. There were no witnesses, no tire marks, just shell casings and pools of blood. 7 months later, the killer struck again, this time in Blue Rock Springs Park, just a few miles from the first murder scene. Another young couple parked, this time near the edge of a golf course at night. The man stepped out of his car without a word, flashlight in his hand, a 9mm Luger in the other, and he opened fire. The woman died instantly. The man, shot in the jaw, shoulder, and leg, lived to describe the killer. It was a white male adult, short, maybe 5'8", real heavyset, beefy build, not blubbery fat, but real beefy, possibly 195 to 200 pounds, maybe even larger. Short curly hair, light brown, almost blonde, with a large face.
Vallejo Police Department.
I want to report a double murder. You go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, Upland Park. You'll find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye.
His voice was calm, like a man returning a library book. Fast forward several months, just past 9:30 p.m. on October 11, 1969, when Paul Stein, a 29-year-old cab driver, picked up a fare near Union Square in San Francisco. The passenger requested a ride to the upscale neighborhood of Presidio Heights. Stein pulled his yellow taxi to a stop at the corner of Washington and Maple. And as he shifted the vehicle into park, the man in the back seat raised a gun and fired a single precise shot into the base of Paul's skull. No struggle, no noise, just execution. The killer leaned forward, took the man's wallet and glasses, and then retrieved a knife. With surgical calm, he sliced away a bloody section of the cabbie's shirt, possibly for a trophy or a message. Then he stepped out of the cab, covered in blood, and walked away as if nothing had happened. But someone saw. Several neighbors witnessed the crime and called 911 immediately. I mean, imagine the daring, the boldness of just walking down the street covered in blood. Officers flooded the area. I mean, it could have ended right there. But for a critical dispatch error. The dispatcher described the suspect as a black male. So when police passed a white man, okay, imagine this. They pass the white man covered in blood, walking casually, just blocks from the scene, matching the actual suspect description. They let him go. Days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter. "This is the Zodiac speaking," the author wrote. "I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington Street and Maple last night. To prove this, here is a blood-stained piece of his shirt." The Zodiac mocked the police officers. "The San Francisco police could have caught me last night if they had searched the park properly. Instead of holding road races with their motorcycles, the car drivers should have just parked and waited for me to come out of cover." A few weeks later, newspapers across the Bay Area received nearly identical letters. Each contained a third of a cryptogram. The killer demanded they be published on the front page, or he'd strike again. Each letter opened with this: "Dear editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman." At the bottom of the letter, he wrote, "I like killing people because it's so much fun." He included another piece of the cab driver's shirt, a humorous greeting card, and another cipher consisting of 340 symbols, all letters of the alphabet. But was the real message in the code? Something else? One of the most chilling incidents occurred in March of 1970. Kathleen Johns, 7 months pregnant and traveling with her infant daughter, was lured off the road in rural California by a man who claimed her tire was loose. After sabotaging her wheel, he convinced her to get into his car. They could drive together for help. For 2 hours, he drove her through dark, empty back roads, threatening to kill her and her baby. Miraculously, she escaped by diving into a field, and later at the police station, she saw a composite sketch of the Zodiac and said, "That's him." Though it was never confirmed, the Zodiac later took credit for the abduction. And a month after the incident, he resumed his letter-writing campaign. The next 6 months were filled with more ciphers, threats. He said he would pick off little darlings as they stepped off school buses. He sent a bomb diagram that included 13 symbols across the top of the page, and 8 weeks later, a request that San Franciscans start wearing a Zodiac button on their lapels. He wanted followers, recognition, control, or else he would kill again. He promised. He sent a manifesto of sorts, a 5-page letter, and included a map and a new target, the peak of Mount Diablo. The Zodiac claimed to have killed again, and this cipher, he said, would lead authorities to his hidden bomb. But there was a catch. They had to solve it using math, angles, geometry, radians. A major break in the case. Not only did you have to be a math whiz to figure out the cipher and find the location of the bomb supposedly on Mount Diablo, but he was dropping clues to investigators about his identity. He was literally telling them that he was someone familiar with advanced mathematics, specifically trigonometry or geometry. The Zodiac wasn't just playing mind games. He was building intellectual traps. He was showing off, as a narcissist would. His classic lines like, "I'm not afraid of the gas chamber," and quoting The Mikado, the operetta by Gilbert and Sullivan, was a tell. He believed he was smarter than everyone in the room. And the little notation at the bottom, where he quoted me, 37, SFPD, probably standing for San Francisco Police Department, 0, which some interpreted to mean a box score indicating 37 victims. The fact that he included a map, a coded bomb location, a reference to radians, meant that he wasn't impulsive. He was controlling, like a puppet master. And his choice of Mount Diablo meant he was familiar with the area. Maybe he even lived in the vicinity. He also seemed to have a disturbing new focus. Investigative reporter Paul Avery of the San Francisco Chronicle. The Zodiac misspelled his name twice, addressing him as Averly. Probably not by mistake. A Halloween card addressed to Avery read, "Peekaboo, you are doomed." The message triggered a cascade of tips, including one about a 1966 murder in Riverside, California, when he might have been evolving into the Zodiac. 18-year-old Sherry Jo Bates murdered after leaving a library. The next morning, her Volkswagen Beetle was found abandoned in the parking lot of Riverside City College. Her body was discovered nearby, between two houses, stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed with such force it nearly decapitated her. There were no signs of robbery, no evidence of sexual assault. Her purse was still beside her, but the scene was rich with other clues. A Timex men's watch, a military boot print, and several strands of hair that were clutched in Sherry Jo's bloodied hand. Weeks later, police received an anonymous letter detailing the murder, stating, "She went to the slaughter like a lamb," and signed cryptically with what could be a capital Z. Avery investigated. A handwriting analyst concluded the same person may have written both the Zodiac and Riverside letters. The killer, it seemed, had been active long before Vallejo. But the public didn't know until San Francisco Chronicle reporter Avery exposed the theory in a front-page article. Zodiac's response? He wrote to the Los Angeles Times confirming what many feared. "I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there." Despite renewed publicity, the leads dried up. The Zodiac letters became less detailed, his ciphers more obscure. He claimed dozens of victims but provided no proof. And in 1971, he sent a postcard suggesting he'd murdered a nurse named Donna Lass in Lake Tahoe. Her remains were identified in 2023. The cause of death remains unknown. But by 1973, the Zodiac was fading into myth. The murders had stopped, the ciphers had grown cold, and San Francisco was exhaling. But then, another letter arrived. No return address, just a symbol in the corner, a circle bisected by a cross. The same symbol the Zodiac had used to sign his letters years before, but this time it came not to San Francisco, but to Albany, New York. The offices of the Albany Times-Union opened the envelope on August 1st of 1973, and inside there was a message typed in all caps. It was erratic, deliberate, the kind of rage that hides behind logic, and it read, all caps, "You are wrong. I'm not dead or in the hospital. I am alive and well, and I'm going to start killing again. Below is the name and location of my next victim. But you better hurry, because I'm going to kill her August 10th at 5 p.m. when the shift changes." Finally, at the bottom of the letter, still all caps, "Albany is a nice town." Beneath the threat, the lines of cryptic symbols, a cipher. The FBI decoded it quickly, and it pointed to a local hospital, Albany Medical Center. It ended with a phrase that felt less like a signature and more like a warning. "This is only the beginning, ... But there was no beginning, no victim, no body, no blood, just the lingering echo of the Zodiac's voice, if it was him at all. Called it a hoax. Others weren't so sure. The tone was right, the cadence familiar, but handwriting experts were split. The letter lacked the key hallmarks of the original Zodiac style. So who wrote it? Maybe it was a copycat. Maybe it was something worse. A disciple. In 1974, a few more cryptic letters trickled into the San Francisco Chronicle. One, postmarked on Valentine's Day, referred to the SLA, or Symbionese Liberation Army, a group of militant urban guerrillas responsible for the abduction of newspaper heiress Patty Hearst. This message was signed, "A Friend." And another came in from a citizen. That person complained about the glorification of violence in newspaper ads for the movie The Badlands, about the killing spree by Richard Starkweather and his 14-year-old girlfriend. Another letter complained that Chronicle columnist Count Marco Spinelli suffered from a, quote, serious psychological disorder and should be sent, quote, back into the hellhole. This letter was signed The Red Phantom, which is really weird because just when the Zodiac seemed to be fading into myth, one last letter praised The Exorcist as, quote, the best satirical comedy ever. And then silence. The police had focused on one primary suspect, a man by the name of Arthur Lee Allen. He lived in Vallejo. He wore a Zodiac watch. His house was close to multiple crime scenes. He was a teacher. He taught children how to create and decode ciphers. And he owned a typewriter similar to the one used to send the infamous Sherry Bates letter. He had a history of disturbing behavior. He'd been an elementary school teacher accused of molestation, and his teaching credentials had been revoked. Allen was fascinated by the idea of killing. He reportedly said he liked the book The Most Dangerous Game, where the protagonist hunts humans for sport. This sort of mirrored the language used in the Zodiac's first cipher, which stated, "I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." Don Cheney, a former friend, told police that Allen talked about wanting to kill people, used the name Zodiac, and taunted police with letters. He allegedly described creating codes, shooting couples at random, and targeting school buses, all before those exact threats appeared in Zodiac letters. People who knew Allen recalled incidents of animal abuse, including reports that he tortured or killed them. The behavior marked what some have called antisocial tendencies and is one of the McDonald triad, traits profiling violent offenders. And Allen was described as socially awkward, aggressive, and prone to emotional outbursts. He had a reputation for manipulating and intimidating others, including family members. And during a 1991 search of his trailer, police discovered diagrams for pipe bombs and other materials consistent with threats made in the Zodiac letters. But perhaps most striking was he had a connection to a family by the name of Seawater, a mother and her children who were taken in by Allen when he was a teacher. He wasn't just close to them, he immersed himself in their lives. He coached the kids in swimming, took them on long road trips, and built trust. But in hindsight, those road trips weren't just innocent outings. They were eerily aligned with murder locations. One of the Seawater boys recalls Allen returning to the car from the beach, covered in blood, throwing items in the trunk, and saying nothing. Well, wouldn't you say something? The person that was taking care of you came out from the beach covered in blood? Amazing. Despite an abundance of circumstantial evidence, investigators never had enough to arrest Allen, incredibly. He passed lie detector tests, his fingerprints and DNA never matched evidence recovered from the Zodiac letters, but he continued to insert himself into the public narrative, even writing letters to reporters that ended or were signed with the customary capital Z. Maybe the most damning piece of evidence might still lie in a knife that Allen once gave to one of the Seawater children. Don't you love that? People giving knives to their kids. It remained wrapped in plastic for decades. Recently tested, it showed traces of blood from multiple individuals. If DNA can be matched to any of the Zodiac victims, it could finally confirm what so many have long believed, that Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac. But what's perhaps probably most unsettling about Allen's link is the fact that serial killers often blend in. I mean, Allen wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was at public pools, teaching young children. He was in classrooms, in living rooms. He was a trusted figure. I mean, we hear this all the time. I mean, we saw this profiled in Dexter with the Trinity killer. You know, they have families, they have children. They blend. And if he was capable of such violence while hiding in plain sight, how many others like him walk among us? I mean, it's fair to say that the Zodiac killer didn't just commit murder, he committed psychological terrorism. I mean, he made the world question what was real. I mean, talk about gaslighting. He made the public complicit in a game. And for more than 50 years, he still remains an enigma, just like one of his cryptograms, unsolved, unnamed, unforgettable. Among the possible theories of who it could be, it reminds me of the Shakespeare mystery. Wait, was he a man, a collection of writers, a university? I mean, people have thrown out theories about who the Zodiac might have been. They've said, well, he was reclusive, he was anti-establishment, maybe he was the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. I mean, Kaczynski did write manifestos. He did use coded language. He did live in the Bay Area. But the problem, he had alibis for almost all of the Zodiac crimes, and he was really never considered a serious suspect. Some even believe that the Zodiac was a satanic cult, not a single person. They pointed to the cryptic symbology in the ciphers and the taunting language as signs of ritualistic or esoteric intent, but no physical evidence ever linked the crimes to a group effort, and the MO was relatively consistent with a lone killer. But this is my favorite. Some believed that the Zodiac was film director Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, seriously. It hinged on the idea that Kubrick was so disturbed by what he had uncovered during the making of Eyes Wide Shut, which allegedly exposed secret societies, that he embedded clues into his films and wrote the Zodiac letters as a side project to mock law enforcement and public hysteria. 100% fringe. There's no evidence and total speculation. Some have even speculated that the Zodiac was actually a woman, though all known witness descriptions pointed to a man. Some believe it could have been a woman because it could have been a school teacher or a nurse who had access to police radio insider knowledge and wanted to deflect suspicion. But interesting, I mean, it's far-fetched, especially considering that the physical evidence and eyewitness accounts never pointed to a woman. And I've even read this, that the Zodiac was a time traveler or alien because of his apparent vanishing act and cryptic otherworldly communication style. They've proposed that the Zodiac may have been non-human, interdimensional, even a time traveler experimenting with human behavior. But of course, zero evidence supports this. Some have even believed that the Zodiac was a CIA or MK Ultra experiment, right? That the Zodiac killings were part of mind control operations run by the US government, with the killer either being a programmed assassin or someone acting out under the influence of LSD experiments gone wrong. I mean, this, of course, lends itself to all the paranoia, right? And all the distrust, but there's actual no linkage, none whatsoever, between MK Ultra documents, CIA. And then, of course, there are the theorists that believe that Zodiac was the son of a prominent politician or celebrity. There have been a handful of authors and podcasters who have actually speculated that he was shielded by powerful connections, either because he was a child of, somebody famous, but all of these theories rely on circumstantial, quote, evidence, loose timelines, handwriting comparisons. Nothing holds up under scrutiny. And then, of course, there's the ultimate, that the Zodiac never existed at all, that he was a hoax created by the media. Try to run that one by the victims. Some argue that only a few of the murders were real. I'm sure that the victims would disagree. And the rest, including the letters, were sensationalist fabrications by journalists or, quote, letter writers not connected to the actual crimes. I mean, there's actually forensic linkage between the letters and real murder scenes, like Paul Stein's blood-soaked shirt being mailed to the Chronicle. What we do know for sure is that the Zodiac had no clear victim type, which is sort of unusual for a serial killer. He had no consistent MO either, and no geographic pattern. And one of the problems with solving the Zodiac case is that the police departments operated in silos. I mean, they had Vallejo PD, didn't share files with San Francisco PD. Forensics were limited at the time. There was no nationwide DNA database. And the Zodiac himself evolved, as many serial killers do. He read the headlines, he stayed ahead, he wrote to us, he mocked us. He told us exactly what he wanted, and we let him disappear. Every story we tell once belonged to someone who never got to finish theirs, and we remember them because crime stands still.